Welcome to Goodfellas History. I'm one of your hosts, Davis.
I'm Nick.
I'm Garrett.
And today we're going to be talking a little bit about the war on drugs, and we're also going to be talking about like incarceration and whatnot. This is going to be kind of a general overview. I figured like in further topics we can kind of branch out into certain segments on this. But there's just a couple things I wanted to highlight with this that I thought were important, at least to take note of and bring up. I'm going to be going through a couple different articles with these. The first one's going to be from Vox. It's actually going to be written by German Lopez, and it's The War on Drugs Explained. Now, this article's a little bit older, if you didn't notice, 2016, but it brings up some really good statistics in it, so I really wanted to go over that. So I'm going to kind of skip over and jump over some paragraphs with you guys. So just kind of bear with me, and let's get to it. So as I was saying, what is the war on drugs? In the 1970s, President Richard Nixon formally launched the war on drugs to eradicate illicit drug use in the U.S. He had a famous quote, "We cannot destroy the drug menace in America, then it will surely in time destroy us. I am not prepared to accept this alternative." And then, over the next couple of decades, particularly under the Reagan administration, it just got escalated further and further, and police and even military efforts against drugs. Nixon inaugurated the war on drugs at a time when America was in hysterics over widespread drug use. Drug use had become more public and prevalent during the 60s, and that's in part due to counterculture movements. But over the past 4 decades, the U.S. committed more than $1 trillion on the war on drugs, and the crackdown has basically failed in, I think, many desired results. This article is kind of being softer about it.
Mm-hmm. How can we pay for that?
Exactly. How can we pay for it?
Yeah.
And I think it does mention that it had several unintended consequences, including a big strain on America's criminal justice system.
Yep.
I think it's a huge strain on the criminal justice system. Like, we talk about statistics of lawyers and whatnot, and it's just staggering how bad it is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, putting more workload on public defenders. Yep.
And it gets even worse because then, as I said, this article is very soft on this, but some of this history is racially tinged, and perhaps as a result, the war on drugs has long hit minority communities the hardest.
Shocker.
Yeah, I know, shocking, right?
Yep.
Led to people wanting to focus on rehabilitation and the decriminalization and even legalization of drugs, which I think is based and awesome.
Yeah.
As it says, is the war on drugs succeeding? And this is one of the things that I thought was staggering. The prices of most drugs, as tracked by the Office of National Drug Control, have plummeted. Between 1981 to 2007, the median bulk price of heroin went down 93%. The median bulk price of powder cocaine is down 87%. And in the same time frame, the median bulk price of crack cocaine fell around 54%. To put that in perspective, here's the graph for you.
Jesus Christ. So it also tells us...
$2,000 to...
This tells us also something else, right? So this tells us that who's actually using the drugs.
At that point, it seems just like rich people. Look at that.
Rich people, or a lot fewer people using smaller amounts of it.
Mm-hmm.
This also tells me that it's a failure because the cost of production has dropped by that much. So now our markets are being flooded with these resources as we've gotten harder on them. And they're still being mass-produced. They're now being more produced.
Well, and this is actually what the article is about to get into, which is the balloon effect. But because of that, actually, it creates more of a lucrative market for said drugs. So people can actually make jobs off of selling it illegally because it's now not around.
Yeah.
And so this is what much of it is explained by the balloon effect. Cracking down on drugs in one area doesn't necessarily reduce the overall supply as well. So it's just going to pop elsewhere.
Yeah.
And sometimes the drug wars failed to push down production altogether. Like, this is interesting because we don't talk about this much, but in Afghanistan, we spent $7.6 billion between 2002 and 2014 to crack down on opium, And what happened is actually opium reached a crop cultivation record in 2013 on the tail end of when we were spending on that.
Oh my hell.
And guess where that money was going?
Where was that money going?
To the drug lords.
Yep.
who were the Taliban.
Oh, as I said, it's just staggering to see how ineffective this is.
Well,
On the
we
demand
helped
side,
we helped maintain the Taliban by doing that.
I know, it just kills me. Ugh. And then on the demand side, illicit drug use has dramatically fluctuated since the drug war began. The Monitoring Future Survey, which tracks illicit drug use among high school students, said in 1975, 4 years after President Nixon launched the war on drugs, 30.7% of high school seniors reportedly used drugs in the previous month. In 1992, it was 14.4. 2013, it went back up to 25.5.
Why do you think that is?
On that one, I'm not sure, actually.
What had just happened? Okay, what was going on in the 1970s was stagflation. So it was economic turmoil in the 19th. Okay, a lot of trouble at home. Mom and dad are arguing over money.
Yeah.
92, things seemed a little bit more stable. So a lot less usage of it. Then in 2013, that's right in the middle of the current the recession that we're in. It never seems to end. And it went back up. So
Yeah,
it's
just
more of
staggering.
It's
Well,
good, Garrett.
well, and also when you have something illegal, you can't regulate. You can't regulate it. So when we have alcohol, and like high schoolers, they get access to alcohol, so it's not like a necessary like 100% truth.
Mm-hmm.
But when you make something legal, you can regulate it. You can be like, okay, people under 21 can't use it, and it's more. I think it's more effective to get people, to not get it, to get like high schoolers specifically. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, not just that, but again, this also plays into rehabilitation. If someone does have like a debilitating drug problem, they can get a safe, secure amount and like get help to get off of that as well.
Also,
which I think is exceptionally important.
It decriminalizes them.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is that these. I mean, we don't want people to be drugged out all the time. We don't want people to be addicted to drugs because it's a mental illness almost. And oftentimes, one of the things I find fascinating is that a lot of these college students, I'm willing to bet a certain proportion of them are dealing with anxiety, depression, and all sorts of things. So that's why we saw that drop, right? So most people who abuse drugs are doing it as a way of escaping their problems, as a way of nursing their own mental or psychological turmoil that they're dealing with. It's designed to numb them, or it's designed to stimulate them. I mean, and by basically criminalizing just the sheer ownership and usage of it, what we are doing is we're basically ensuring that these people will never seek outside support or outside help, and it ostracizes them. Like, we have a huge problem in our society with atomization, and this makes it much worse because you are stigmatized. I mean, like a lot of these people became stigmatized in the 1980s because it wasn't just that using drugs is bad and drug dealers are bad. It's that anybody who uses drugs are bad by nature. They're morally weak. They're morally repugnant. And I can't tell you how many horror stories I've heard from that.
It's unfortunate. This is the part of the article I also really liked, though. So it says, how does the U.S. decide which drugs are regulated or banned? And the U.S. uses what's called the Drug Scheduling System. It's under the Controlled Substances Act. And there are 5 categories of controlled substances known as schedules, which weigh a drug's medical value and abuse potential.
Yeah.
So it gets kind of interesting because under this system, Schedule 1 drugs are considered to have no medical value and a high potential for abuse. Schedule 2 drugs have high potential for abuse but some medical value, and then it goes down to 5, obviously. Now what's interesting about that is marijuana and heroin are Schedule 1 drugs.
And both of them have been used historically for medicinal purposes.
Yep. What's really funny to me is then cocaine, meth, and opioid painkillers are Schedule 2, so they're actually considered safer.
And marijuana?
Yep.
What the hell? No one has ever overdosed. Correct me if I'm wrong. No one has ever overdosed on marijuana.
There's no documented there's no documented event where somebody overdosed on marijuana. More often
Yep.
than not,
It's a
any
flat
deaths.
out lie.
More often than not, deaths associated with marijuana usage is when mixing drugs. And usually that never happens.
Yeah.
Most people don't drink alcohol and smoke marijuana in copious amounts at the same time. Usually it's either or. And it's not the marijuana that causes the death, it's the alcohol poisoning that causes the death.
Yeah, so I thought that part was just fascinating.
Well, I love that last sentence. Sorry, can you? I don't want to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Flow, but can you go back up? So
Yeah.
the last sentence: Congress specifically exempted alcohol and tobacco from the schedules in 1970. I would argue that alcohol is worse than marijuana.
I would as well. It actually
love-
has deaths that can be attributed to it.
I love
Tobacco and
drinking
alcohol are worse than marijuana.
Yeah. Yeah, I love drinking alcohol, but I would say it's way worse than freaking marijuana. But the issue is if you abuse it, you're not going to prison for it.
Yep, exactly. If you buy it, you're not going to prison for it.
Yep. So
Yeah, as I
Very
said, that part,
interesting.
this part of the article I thought was just absolutely fascinating.
Oh,
And then it goes, how does the U.S. enforce the war on drugs? So on the domestic front, the federal government supplies local and state police departments with funds, legal flexibility, and special equipment to track down on illicit drugs. Federal assistance helped us take out major drug organizations, and we took out a number of them in Baltimore. Neil Franklin, a retired police major and executive director of law enforcement against prohibition.
Well, you know, when you fund and finance stormtroopers, you know, that's what these guys are. They're stormtroopers. These
Yeah.
units, these narcotics units, are oftentimes very much isolated. They don't work on any other cases other than narcotics cases. They also tend to be the dirtiest, most corrupt groups because they have the most contact with, you know, illicit drug users. Like, there's just so many problems with this, and they often tend to be the most armed and considered the experts when it comes to this. So they're insulated on both ends.
And this is actually, there's something very fascinating about that as well. Go ahead, Garrett, and then we'll get into that.
oh well. Sorry, it just says that he opposes the war on drugs, which
Yeah.
is kind of interesting.
Yep. But you were talking about like weaponry and like state-of-the-art like tracking and whatnot. Part of the reason is this. So some of the funding, particularly from the Byrne Justice Assistant Grant Program, it encourages local and state police to participate in anti-drug operations. And
Oh,
if
yeah.
the police don't use the money to go after illicit substances, they risk losing it as well. So I thought that was very fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Even when we see police officers sometimes planting drugs, that's
And what's
Probably
funny about
there
that is that if they actually succeed at the drug war, the department loses that money.
yeah. So got to keep it going.
Exactly.
You got to expand it.
Yeah.
So oftentimes what you will actually end up, like, there are telltale signs when drug cartels or drug sellers enter into a community. Most cops are able to recognize that. They choose not to address those issues and nip it in the ass early on to allow it to expand to the point where it becomes an issue, and this will allow them to expand their department and ergo expand those narcotic operations and lead to more funding going to the police department.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's all I was going to go with this article. I wanted to jump over into another one, so just bear with me for a sec. This is more just numbers based, which is why I like this one a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I should give you guys all of this, though. This is from the Center for American Progress. It's by Betsy Pearl.
I see Vox still.
Yeah, I still see Vox.
Oh, I bounced over already. What the heck?
Damn it, Betsy DeVos.
Maybe do you need to reset your screen share?
Yeah, let me
Maybe
do
go to
that.
Yeah.
I'll edit this out. Don't worry.
Okay.
I can tell you about the drug war, guys.
I know you can, honestly. Go
Oh,
to your
my
screen.
sleepy bye. Somebody's taking a train to Sleepy
There we
Time
go.
Junction. Okay,
All right, I can see it.
Perfect.
Betsy Pearl.
All right, yeah, as I said, this is the Center for American Progress. It's by Betsy Pearl, and it's just numbers, ending the war on drugs based by the numbers.
Yeah.
So let's get down into there. So, racial disparities. This is why I really wanted to jump into this. This is, I think, some of the most important parts of this. So black Americans are 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana charges than their white peers. In fact, black Americans make up nearly 30% of all drug-related arrests, despite accounting for only 12.5% of all substance users.
But systemic racism isn't a thing.
Exactly, not a thing at all. And it gets even worse for them, actually. Black Americans are nearly 6 times more likely to be incarcerated for drug-related offenses than their white counterparts. 6 times more. And this is despite equal substance usage rates. Almost 80% of people serving time for federal drug offenses are black or Latino.
Yeah.
And this is in state prisons. People of color make up 60% of those serving time for drug charges.
Yeah, I can tell you that.
Yeah, ending the drug war is a huge step in equality.
I can tell you that
so many of them are locked up.
I can tell you that I've ran into more diversity working in the prison than being on a college campus.
Yeah, I believe that. It's horrible.
And so we're going to get into it near the end, but this is basically like the new version of slavery.
The new Jim Crow?
Yep.
In the federal system, the average black defendant convicted of a drug offense will serve nearly the same amount of time as a white defendant would for a violent crime.
Oh my god.
Yep, 58.7 months to 61.7. People of color amount for 70% of all defendants convicted of charges with a mandatory minimum sentence. Prosecutors are twice as likely to pursue a mandatory minimum sentence for a black defendant than a white defendant. Jesus. And black defendants are also less likely to receive relief from mandatory minimums. So, as you can see, it's just brutal.
This is such a failure for the people of color in this country. It's ridiculous.
It
was by intent. So there are leaked tapes and documentation of Richard Nixon flat out explicitly saying that this was designed for the Republican Party to appeal to Southern voters.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And this was not, and it was dog whistling, but it also was a way of giving the Southern states the power to basically put the boot back on the neck of the African American Southerners, and it also expanded that to Northern states as well. This has allowed for essentially segregation, at least by legal means, or by paralegal means, to keep black and white people separated.
Yep.
And this is what's led to certain school districts being incredibly poor, often filled with people of color, crime-ridden and drug-ridden, and richer school districts oftentimes being white, not having to deal with many of those issues, but still, drugs still exist there.
Yeah, drugs are still circulating.
But there's not. It's not crime-ridden, because where are the police at?
They're all in the poor neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm. So.
Oh my god, it's so annoying.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah.
And then there's also the economic impact, which further just makes it even worse.
Yeah.
So since 1971, the war on drugs has cost the U.S., as I said, an estimated $1 trillion. Mm-hmm. In 2015, the federal government spent an estimated $9.2 million every day to incarcerate people charged with drug-related offenses. That's $3.3 billion annually. State governments,
our infrastructure could help fund it.
State governments spent another $7 billion in 2015 to incarcerate individuals for drug-related charges. North Carolina spent $70 million. Georgia spent $78.6 million just to lock up people of color for drug offenses.
Oh my god.
Yep, 1.6 times more than the state's budget current for substance use treatment services.
This is what our tax dollars are going to.
Yep. And here is the most brutal statistic for it. In contrast, marijuana legalization would save roughly $7.7 billion per year.
And yield an additional $6 billion in tax revenue.
That's just an averted enforcement costs.
Mm-hmm.
The net total's $13.7 billion. That could send more than 650,000 students to public universities every year.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's truly, I was reading some of this and I was just like getting more and more black-pilled with it. It was so brutal.
Well, once again, this is what when I talk about institutions and power, this is a perfect example of it. Like, this is designed to keep people down. It's what it was designed to do. This was a massive expansion of state power over everyday Americans. So whenever I hear teabaggers talk about their rights and liberties, I would always point this out to them. What rights? What liberties? I mean, it's insane. It's insane how much power the state has over people now, in comparison to where we were 100 years ago. Like, even under Prohibition, the state didn't have this kind of power over people.
Yeah, as I said, it's truly just like, it was humbling.
Well, at least, during Prohibition, and correct me if I'm wrong, you could still drink alcohol, you just couldn't manufacture it.
You couldn't manufacture it, and you couldn't sell it.
You couldn't sell it, but any alcohol like you had, like, no one would necessarily arrest you just for consuming it.
No, it wasn't criminal. It wasn't criminal to own or to drink alcohol. It was criminal to manufacture and produce, or manufacture and sell alcohol.
Yeah.
So,
and I think what we're kind of looking at with the opioid epidemic is, even back in Prohibition, a lot of people would get alcohol prescribed to them by their doctors as a way to kind of circumvent all of that.
Yeah.
We're literally looking at a different form. It's
even worse.
Prohibition, just as different drugs.
This is where Prohibition would have gone if it had an end.
So, Garrett, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I wasn't going to brush up on it, but there are some statistics here that are fascinating with that.
Yeah, I just saw that, so I figured I'd throw that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in 2016, 11.8 million Americans misused prescription opioids or heroin, and around 3.6% of adolescents, 12 to 17, and 7.3% of young adults, 18 to 25, reported opioid misuse in the last year.
Oh my God.
Here's where it gets really sad. Every 16 minutes, a person in America dies from an opioid overdose.
Yeah, how many people just from this recording session?
Yep.
Do the math.
In 2016, 42,249 Americans died from opioid overdoses.
Oh my God.
That's more than the number of people killed in motor vehicle accidents currently.
And from what I know, that really affects rural communities too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Poor, impoverished communities.
Yeah.
So the opioid crisis it's a whole other bag of worms. But once again, it was pushed by the very same kind of experts and thought leaders that we've been listening to since the 1970s. And guess who they're friends with? They donate to the Republican Party and they're friends with the Democrats.
Yep.
And so this is another reason why Hillary Clinton did not perform really well in these places.
Yeah. Oh my God.
As I said, it's brutal. Well, these are all the statistics I was wanting to go over, but I did want to go over one other thing, so let me pull that up there.
Yeah.
There it is. Just a stark reminder that a good portion of these people are also now going to be used to fight fires. This is from USA Today. And this is just one article, but if it will load.
It's loading up. It's just taking some time.
Yeah. Whoa. Let me go back. Don't know where it decided to go to. There we go. I'm just going to give it a sec.
Yeah.
You're good.
I thought this was like a kind of a good thing to end on, just because it's kind of a reminder that a lot of these, basically all of these, are non-violent as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Like, so in my mind, I'm like, that's not really even crimes at that point then. But
that's basically what we're talking about when we say it should be legalized. It's for non-violent drug offenses, because obviously if someone gets high off of whatever and kills somebody, that's not what we're talking about.
The problem isn't that they were high. The problem is that they killed somebody.
Yeah,
that's the issue. That's the consequence of that.
When it's non-violent, it's more self-destructive, and we're punishing people for basically punishing themselves. If you think about it, it's the weirdest thing. It's like how technically suicide's illegal, but do you send anybody to jail for trying to commit suicide?
No, we are trying to help them.
Yeah, it's like, this is just a black pill. But I mean, the thing is, that this once again isn't new. Like, prison labor, I can tell you guys, prison labor has been the substitute for slavery for decades, for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Like, there's a really great movie about that. It's called Shawshank Redemption.
Love that movie.
There's actually laws on the book that were designed to prohibit that kind of behavior. But once again, those laws are either not being enforced or they were basically kicked out.
Yeah.
Oftentimes by the hyper-conservative, pro-business groups that took over state governments in general.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, throughout the 90s and the 80s. It's infuriating to me because, like, what do you expect these people to do when they leave?
They have
Especially when they're
nothing
making less
waiting for them.
especially when they're making less than minimum wage. Like
Yep, and that's what we're about to get into, actually.
Yeah,
As I said, this is from USA Today. Jared A. Brock is the writer on this one. Inmates get little training to become firefighters, and they're paid as little as $2.90 per day.
Jesus Christ.
So if it will let me scroll down, I would love to show you that. So, while everyone knows California fought more than 600 fires, this was last year, very few people are aware that each year thousands of incarcerated men, women, and teenagers join one of 92 inmate fire crews.
So are these people in juvie?
What was that?
Are these like juvie
Yep,
teens?
juveniles.
Yeah.
Yeah, juvie.
They're at least 16, right?
Some could be as young as 15 or 14.
I was going to say, Garrett,
I didn't even think about people in juvie. How is
Yep.
that? And it's totally legal in the eyes of
Once
labor
again,
laws.
this is what happens when you stigmatize people and dehumanize them. This is why I'm not surprised
Wow.
that fascism is on a rise across the world. This is the crux of dehumanization. So
shit.
when I can tell you right now, it is very easy to do that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you go through the academy and you talk to people, and those people, you never will believe that they'll hold such repugnant views of inmates, and eventually they do. And it's because they dehumanize them. They've gotten to a point where the inmates are part of a faceless community of a thing.
Yeah.
And so these kids, these juvies, like, I gotta tell you, right now, there is more sexual abuse right now in juvie than in regular prison.
I believe it.
Between
wow.
staff and teenagers. And that's because they are double vulnerable. They're double vulnerable because of the fact that A, they're not adults, and B, they're prisoners.
Yep, I was going to say it's an enhanced power dynamic. With prisoners in general, there's already that power dynamic, like influence. But with like juveniles, it gets even worse. Oh, it's so sickening.
What's the opposite of rehabilitation? And that's what you have here. That's not rehabilitation.
It's just,
Garrett,
it's just punishment. It's
Yeah.
retribution.
Yeah. Well, Garrett, and with the firefighters, as I said, I kind of want to go over the statistics in this because, as I said, they make $2.90 a day, and they can work in brutal 24-hour shifts battling out-of-control fires.
In 2 days, they can afford a $5 footlong from Subway.
Yeah.
Basically. And that's not including the taxes that Uncle Sam takes us out.
Oh my god.
And so, as it says, no one is forced to join a firefighting crew, but the alternative is not having your record expunged. It's often more bleak and life-threatening. So officially called the Conservation Camp Program, it's about as ghastly as one can imagine. Each year, upwards of 3,000 inmates volunteer to risk their lives in order to earn a shot at better living conditions, early parole, or a fresh start after incarceration. The shackled labor makes up nearly a third of the state's firefighting capacity.
That's California, right?
Yep, this is California.
I'll tell you right now, in Idaho as well as in Utah, it's even more than that. It's
Wow,
somewhere
they
around,
get their freaking cheap labor.
It's
like
around
it's such a good
42%.
deal for them.
well,
Wow.
for Idaho, it's about 42%. I think it's about 43% here in Utah.
Holy shit.
And so, yeah, the private prisons are going to rake in profits using this. Californian taxpayers do save money, $100 million a year. Is it worth it?
Well, how many taxpayers are in California? That's like what per person? Like a few bucks?
Yep.
Oh my god. It's
So
not worth
today,
it.
yeah. Today, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation runs 2 female camps, 1 teen camp, and more than 40 male camps.
Oh my
And
god.
even in this situation, I'm going to tell you right now, the amount of abuse that the women and the teenagers probably get, both sexual or otherwise, is probably rampant.
Oh, yeah.
And they're not going to come forth about it because they'll lose access to those benefits that they'd be getting. They'd be sent back.
Yeah, as I said, it's sickening. And so this is the last little statistic I wanted to read on this. That some firefighters have died. Those who live not only face the fires, but also sickness, sleep deprivation. Remember, they're doing 24-hour shifts with this. They have animals, so mountain lions, scorpions, rattlesnakes. They're also 4 times more likely than the regular firefighters to suffer injuries.
It's because they're not properly equipped or properly trained.
Yep.
Can I ask a question? So, what happens when they die? Because you are in the state's custody. So, what happens? Like,
They just report it to them, and they usually sign They usually sign a contract and a legal documentation saying that they're willing to take on those risks. Their loved ones won't be able to sue the state. They won't be able to do anything. They relinquished any ability for anybody to sue them because they're technically volunteering for it.
A teenager can make the legal decision to die for the state
Yep.
in the state's custody.
Yep.
Fighting fires.
Yep.
That is, oh my god. I almost have no words. That's completely barbaric.
I mean, so let me explain. Like, when I tell you guys that it's not hard for me to understand why fascism is on the rise everywhere, is that we've normalized it.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, let me tell you, most of the people that we're talking about here, not only are they non-violent offenders, they're also the ones less likely to have to spend as much time in prison. Their prison sentences are the shortest. They're trying the most to shorten their time that they're in there or have certain things expunged from their record. So they're the most desperate. So I'm telling you this right now. Like, the reality is, there's a financial... private prisons use prison labor more than the state does. I would not be surprised if we allowed them. The private prisons would allow the inmates to be the guards.
Oh, yeah. I can see that happening.
Why? So private prisons, but you're still in the state's custody.
Technically,
right?
but the state has basically relinquished. It is paying the company to do the service for the state. So what the state is doing is it's basically taking on all the risk, but the company takes all the profits. And guess who gets the contracts for the food? Because, I mean, a lot of people don't think about this. There are food companies that have contracts with these prisons.
Oh my god.
And oftentimes, those people have connections.
So they love the fact that the prisons are freaking bloated with
Yep.
inmates.
Oh, yeah.
Could lauder the
they're
moolah.
thrilled.
And once
They
again,
are-
none of the risk. They bear virtually no risk and receive all the profits.
Yeah, this really, what it comes down to is that, like, prisons right now are just a money-making operation. And
They've
terrifying.
always been that. They've always been that. That's why laws were put into effect. That's why a lot of New Deal laws were put into effect that were designed to attack a lot of this. To prohibit, basically, prison labor without certain things being put into place. There are some states that even allowed prisoners to unionize back in the day. But that doesn't happen anymore. This is one of the reasons why prisoners are stigmatized. This is also one of the reasons why prisons have been out of sight and out of mind. And even so, even if you do get possibly a glimpse of the rugged prison, it's sold to you as entertainment, like with Oz, the prison show.
Well, yeah. And when they sign these contracts basically saying, like, I agree to all the risks, I'm assuming they don't have counsel there.
No.
Because I can't imagine that these contracts are easy to read, especially for,
I'll tell you right now, Garrett, do you think, as a corrections officer, we had fine print.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was a magistrate at the state. I was a corrections officer. I worked for both the state of Utah and the state of Idaho. Okay, and I'll tell you right now, there were catch-alls, there were loopholes. Yeah. Okay, and I'm a servant of the state. I don't have a lawyer when I sign the contract with them. Basically saying that I would work for overtime, but not get paid for overtime. I'd have comp time in Idaho, even though that's technically illegal. But I signed a contract. So if they're willing to do that to the corrections officers, what do you think they're willing to do to the inmates? Especially when the inmates have less access to lawyers, less access to funding, less contact with the outside world.
Yeah.
So this is the thing. And this is one of the reasons why I want to see it into this drug war, is that this has basically increased the power of the state. And like what Edmund Brooks said, with more power, greater the possibility of abuse.
Yeah.
And this is just an example of that.
Exactly. And that's why I wanted to go over it. As I said, like, the drug war is really just, like, the start of it in my eyes. Like, there's so many problems with the prison system in general. The drug war is just the beginning. I'm like, this is, like, crazy to me. As I was reading it, I was just, like, humbled.
It's insane. Like, I'll flat out tell you guys, like, there are a lot of problems. And the thing that really sucks about it is, even as a corrections officer, my power over that was so minimal. All this came down from the top. All this came from even past the warden. These were laws. These were enforced by the legislature, by the governor.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about these things, this is what I'm talking about when I talk about institutional power. Like, having a certain governor or a certain senator in a position of power can change the lives of millions of people. All it requires them enforcing certain laws or choosing not to do certain things. And, you know, that's why elections matter. Because, I mean, this was allowed to take place because people thought everything was okay. And right now we're dealing with the ramifications of that.
Well, and I can't even imagine, because the demand for this prison labor is going up, because climate change has created the conditions for more fires to happen and bigger fires.
Exactly, yeah.
It's all connected. I don't really think a lot of people realize, like, just how much all this impacts just everything else. It's completely, oh my god, it makes me sick.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and the thing is that most people don't know about this, though. Most people don't know about this. Most people don't know that prison labor, like, who do you think cooks the food?
The prisoners.
Prisoners. Who do you think does the laundry?
It's the prisoners.
Prisoners. Literally, like...
Who does the cleaning?
Yeah, it's the prisoners. Like, it's a nice revolving machine they got going now with this.
Well, and then, of course, they can use their, like, basically slave wages, put it back into the prison in the form of, what is it called? The commissary?
Yep, commissary.
And so that's actually one thing I skipped over, but that is something to bring up, is that actually there's, like, the prices are increasing in the commissary as well, as of late.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Gotta get their money back.
Mm-hmm.
The prison, and the thing is, the prison's not making the money. It's the companies that are part of that commissariat. The prison makes no money off of commissary.
Yeah. Well, they make money by those companies.
Those companies make money, but the prison doesn't.
Yeah, but the prison allows them to do that because
the prison allows them to do it because the companies
pay them.
No, they pay the state in taxes.
Well, yes, yeah, that's kind of what I meant.
And many of these companies probably have friends in the state legislature, and probably donate to campaigns.
Oh my god. This is kind of blackpilling me.
As I said, this blackpilled me. And actually, I kind of wanted to end on this note.
Yeah.
This was the ultimate part of the black pill for me. As I said earlier, California saved $100 million. However, because California has so many people, that averaged out to be $2.50 per citizen. So, you know, those people that are dying, yep.
They basically prop up this, you know, legal form of slavery, really.
Mm-hmm.
$2.50.
But who's really benefiting from that?
Per citizen of California.
But the thing is like, who's really benefiting from that?
Not even the
citizens of
citizenry.
California.
Not the citizens. It's who's benefiting from it. It's not the firefighters.
It's the corporations.
Corporations that fucking run it.
Mm-hmm. So that
So, yeah, as I said-
$2.50, that $2.50 that everybody is being saved, 50 cents per every one of those people is going to the flipping corporations.
Mm-hmm.
In reality, people are only saving $2 because they're still those people are still incarcerated.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't want to be too doomer pill on this because I think there are very easy ways of preventing this kind of behavior, and some of it is we got to get certain people out of power.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
point this out for what this is. This is slave labor.
Yep.
I think I get why it is blackpilling, and I was really sinking into the depths of despair. But I think actually we need to look at why it's so important to legalize drugs, decriminalize drugs, and just really crack down on the prison industry in general.
Yeah. you
Like
gotta
this
do
should be
both.
something that we really should take to the streets for and be like, you want justice? This is what we need to work for.
And I think that, once again, just from my own experiences, I can tell you guys that it's dehumanizing to everybody involved in the process.
Yeah.
Like, so many people, so many corrections officers become so black-pilled by the process. I mean, these guys get really jaded. I mean, I've had to bury people because they
I
took
was
their own
going to say,
lives.
that doesn't even get into the prison guard suicide rate, which has been insane.
And inmate suicide rate. I mean,
Yeah.
the reality is that there is a better way of handling this. There are solutions in place, but right now that's not happening because society has such a stigmatization towards criminals, while not realizing that the vast majority of people who are criminals in this situation are nonviolent offenders.
Yes.
So, I mean, what I could take away from this is that we do need to end the drug war. We need to reform our prison systems. And more importantly, we need to reinforce labor laws so that if inmates do work, they are still working and they're entitled to their rights when they're doing work. You know, they already have certain rights eliminated or, downsized to them. If they're actually going to work, they might as well be paid the minimum wage.
With
If not more.
overtime,
If
after
not
a
Yeah.
certain amount of
with
hours,
overtime
yeah.
laws protecting them. Because, I mean,
Yes.
this would allow them, because what would also then happen is that if they leave prison and they've been doing minimum wage work, they might actually have some money saved. Hell, they might even be able to take those skills to another job. I mean, I'm of the mindset, I actually want anybody who's nonviolent offender, the moment they're done with their sentencing, that should be expunged from the record. There's no goddamn reason why your employer should know if you were sent to prison for a felony that you
Especially
did.
if it's non-violent.
Especially if it's nonviolent. That's none of their
Yes.
fucking business. That shouldn't
It
prohibit
isn't.
people.
It-
It shouldn't prohibit people from being able to get a job. So these are part of the reforms that I'm talking about that we need to do, and we need to get on it. Because
we
this
have a
is a
lot of
social
work to do.
because this is a social cancer that is going to be a slow death if we don't handle it.
Rehabilitation shouldn't, or what we call it rehabilitation, shouldn't be, shouldn't leave you in a worse spot than before you went in, because you come out, you didn't get great wages from, the labor you did, you have a record now, you know what I mean, you're in a worse spot. That shouldn't be what rehabilitation is.
Yeah, I agree. Well, fellas, do we have any last thoughts on this? I don't want to bring us down, but I
No.
do want to just say, obviously we have a lot of work to do with this.
Yeah. I think I've said my piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same here.
Well, I'll just say, I don't want to, don't let this completely sink us. Just
Yeah.
realize that we have a lot more stuff that we need to fight for on this.
Yeah.
You guys have liked what you've seen, please subscribe, do all that good stuff for us. It really does help right now.
Smash
Thanks
that
for
like
watching.
button. Smash
it.
that like button.
Smash
it. And hit the bell if you want to know when we're putting stuff up.
Yeah.
Get kids.
Well, thank you for
Alright.
watching Goodfellas History.
Peace.